Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. This quote encapsulates the cyclical nature of power and ambition that we will explore today through the lens of one of the most formidable characters in Game of Thrones, Tywin Lannister. Hello, and welcome back to In Perspective. Today we're diving deep into Tywin Lannister, a man of immense power and ruthlessness. His legacy is defined by relentless ambition and the profound impact he has on those around him. How does a character like Tywin influence the generations that follow him? Let's explore this question together. A Game of Thrones was more than just a television series. It was a cultural phenomenon that captivated audiences around the globe. Adapted from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, the show drew viewers in with its complex characters, intricate political plots, and stunning visuals. It wasn't merely a fantasy epic filled with dragons and knights. It was a deeply human story filled with moral grey areas. The narrative showcased the struggle for power and the consequences of ambition, weaving a tapestry of human experience across the Seven Kingdoms. The show premiered in 2011 on HBO and quickly became one of the most ambitious and widely watched series in TV history. Millions were drawn into its gritty narrative, eager to witness the fate of beloved characters. Yet amid the excitement, the show dared to subvert audience expectations. One of the boldest moves was in its first season when it killed off Sean Bean's Eddard Stark, the protagonist representing honor and duty. This shocking turn of events left audiences stunned and signaled the show's ruthless nature. In the world of Game of Thrones, alliances could crumble overnight, and betrayal was always lurking in the shadows. The series was a masterclass in character development, creating a rich tapestry of personalities, each with their own motives and flaws. From the noble Stark family to the scheming Lannisters, every character was carefully crafted to evoke empathy and disdain. Audiences found themselves rooting for characters who, in another narrative, might be considered villains. The show's success lay not only in its storytelling, but in its ability to blur the lines between good and evil, forcing viewers to confront their own biases. One of the key elements that set Game of Thrones apart was its willingness to tackle complex themes, including loyalty, honor, betrayal, and the quest for power. The characters were often faced with moral dilemmas, forcing them to make choices that would define their fates and the fates of those around them. This was particularly evident in the political machinations of the realm, where alliances shifted as quickly as the tides, and the struggle for the Iron Throne became a dangerous game. Amidst this tumultuous backdrop, Tywin Lannister emerged as a figure of immense power and influence. He was the architect behind many of the political moves that shaped Westeros. Tywin stood out as a character who seemed untouchable, a titan among men. He wasn't a hero, nor was he a typical villain. Instead, Tywin was something more complex, an embodiment of ruthless ambition wrapped in cold, calculated decisions. His formidable nature was accentuated by his commanding presence and keen intellect, making him a character that audiences both admired and despised. The duality of his character contributed significantly to the show's thematic depth. Tywin excelled in Machiavellianism, mastering the art of power by being cunning, strategic, and ruthless. He was a quintessential Machiavellian figure, someone who believed that the ends justified the means, and he never hesitated to use deceit, manipulation, or fear to achieve his goals. Whether it was orchestrating the infamous Red Wedding or pulling the strings behind the scenes in King's Landing, Tywin's influence was always felt, even if it wasn't always seen. He epitomized the belief that it was better to be feared than loved, making him both revered and despised by his enemies and allies alike. Tywin's rise to power was significantly influenced by the failings of his father, Tytos Lannister. Despite being the Lord of Casterly Rock, Tytos was seen as weak and ineffective. His bannermen disrespected him, and his inability to manage his vassals led to widespread discontent. Tytos didn't earn his position. It was thrust upon him after his brothers died, leaving him ill-equipped to lead. Tywin witnessed this weakness firsthand, fueling his determination never to repeat his father's mistakes. When Tytos allowed a rebellion to rise against him, Tywin took matters into his own hands, ensuring that the family name would endure. This formative experience taught Tywin the importance of control, setting him on a path to reshape not only House Lannister, but the entire political landscape of Westeros. This ideology of strength and control carried over into Tywin's relationships with his children, shaping their lives and futures in profound ways. Each of Tywin's children represented aspects of him, yet they also embodied his failures. Tyrion had Tywin's sharp mind and astute thinker, with a knack for strategy and manipulation. Jaime, like his father, was a great fighter and a physical embodiment of Lannister's strength. Cersei, with her beauty and opportunistic nature, mirrored Tywin's ability to exploit situations for gain. Yet, despite their strengths, none of Tywin's children lived up to his expectations. The pressure of ambition suffocated them, often pushing them into rebellion against the very ideals Tywin embodied. The disparity between Tywin's expectations and the reality of his children's lives created a breeding ground for conflict. Tywin's overbearing nature often left his children feeling inadequate, fueling resentment and rebellion. Tyrion, in particular, became a constant reminder of Tywin's failures as a father. Born a dwarf, Tyrion was seen as a disappointment despite his intelligence and cunning. This led to a lifelong struggle for acceptance, ultimately resulting in a turbulent relationship marked by betrayal and misunderstanding. One of the most notable moments that demonstrated Tywin's Machiavellian nature was when Joffrey Baratheon was poisoned at his own wedding. Tywin, ever the opportunist, wasted no time in pointing the finger at Tyrion. Despite knowing Tyrion's character and recognizing that his son was likely innocent, Tywin saw an opportunity to rid himself of the son he deemed a stain on the family name. He immediately orchestrated a trial that was less about justice and more about eliminating a threat to his legacy. Tywin's readiness to accuse Tyrion without hard evidence highlighted his willingness to sacrifice even his own blood in the pursuit of power. Tywin's disapproval extended further when it came to Tyrion's relationship with Shae. For Tywin, Shae was a mere prostitute, someone who could never match the expectations he had for his son. Tywin forced Tyrion into a political marriage with Sansa Stark, believing that a union with a Stark would fortify House Lannister's power. Meanwhile, Shae served as Sansa's maid, a bitter reminder of the love Tyrion was forced to abandon. Shae's hurt feelings eventually transformed into anger. This transformation was not only a personal blow for Tyrion, but a devastating twist of fate that highlighted the chaos Tywin had inadvertently sown within his family. The increasing trust issues and insecurities that plagued Tyrion's relationship with Shae made it all the more poignant when she chose to align herself with the Lannisters, ultimately crushing him. Her affair with Tywin was a final act of betrayal, a cherry on top of the horror Tyrion faced as he grappled with the consequences of a family torn apart by ambition. Shae's eventual betrayal, where she testifies against Tyrion after Joffrey's death, underscores how deeply entrenched these family dynamics were, marking a tragic end to their love story. Tywin's obsession with maintaining the Lannister name was perhaps his greatest strength and his greatest flaw. He was so focused on keeping House Lannister on top that he sacrificed personal happiness and neglected other aspects of life, like marriage and meaningful connections. After the death of his beloved wife, Joanna, Tywin never remarried, despite having ample opportunity to form alliances through marriage that could have strengthened his house even further. His singular focus on power made him emotionally distant, unable to form relationships that weren't rooted in political gain. In Tywin's mind, marriage and love were secondary to the preservation of power. This detachment made him a more effective leader, but a less fulfilled man. His personal life was defined by duty, and any emotional connections were seen as distractions from his ultimate goal, to secure the Lannister legacy. So tunnel vision led to some of his most significant mistakes. He failed to see how his emotional detachment alienated his children, who, despite their loyalty, constantly felt the weight of his expectations. So one of Tywin's biggest miscalculations was his underestimation of his children's individual desires and ambitions. He assumed that his children would fall in line with his grand designs without fully understanding their personal struggles. And Jaime, for example, loved Cersei, and that love superseded any loyalty to the Lannister name. Tywin failed to understand Jaime's inner conflict, which ultimately resulted in Jaime betraying Tywin's expectations by refusing to take on the role of Lord of Casterly Rock. The most significant blow to Tywin's legacy, however, was Tyrion's rebellion. The strained relationship between Tywin and Tyrion came to a head when Tyrion discovered Shay in his father's bed, a final act of betrayal that was too much for Tyrion to bear. Tywin, who had always regarded Tyrion with disdain, failed to anticipate the depth of his son's anger and hurt, and in that moment Tywin's Machiavellian schemes collapsed, not from an external enemy, but from within his own family. Tyrion, having suffered years of emotional abuse and neglect, could no longer tolerate his father's hypocrisy and cruelty. This ultimately led to Tywin's death at Tyrion's hands, a poetic end for a man who believed himself untouchable. Tywin's downfall came not from a rival house or political maneuvering, but from the very people he sought to control his own children. His relentless pursuit of power blinded him to the personal relationships that could have saved him. He saw his children as extensions of his legacy, tools to be used in his grand designs, but in doing so, he failed to recognize their humanity. In the end, it was this blindness that cost him everything. Another significant aspect of Tywin's character was his relationship with King Joffrey. Though Joffrey was his grandson, Tywin had little patience for the boy's impulsive and sadistic tendencies. As the true power behind the throne, Tywin often had to clean up the messes left in Joffrey's wake, using his political acumen to maintain stability in the realm. He recognized Joffrey's flaws but understood that controlling the king was essential to keeping the Lannisters in power. Tywin's interactions with Joffrey highlighted his ability to manipulate even the most volatile personalities. He had no illusions about Joffrey's cruelty, but saw the boy as a necessary evil, someone who could be molded or at least managed to serve the Lannister cause. In one particularly telling scene, Tywin effortlessly dismisses Joffrey during a council meeting, asserting his dominance without so much as raising his voice. This display of power is quintessential Tywin, always in control, always a step ahead. However, Tywin's failure to fully curb Joffrey's excesses was another sign of his limitations. While Tywin could manage the politics of Westeros with ease, he struggled to rein in the personal chaos that Joffrey brought to the throne. This inability to completely control his family members, whether it was Joffrey's recklessness or Cersei's blind ambition, showed that even Tywin's power had its limits. Tywin's dynamic with Arya Stark during their time together at Harrenhal is another fascinating facet of his character. Unbeknownst to Tywin, Arya was his enemy's daughter, but their interactions revealed much about Tywin's approach to leadership. He saw potential in Arya's intelligence and quick wit, even though he believed her to be a low-born servant. Their conversations were layered with tension, as Arya concealed her identity while learning from one of the most powerful men in Westeros. In these moments, we saw a different side of Tywin, a man who could recognize talent regardless of social standing. His respect for Arya's cunning mirrored the qualities he admired in Tyrion, even if he refused to acknowledge them in his own son. Yet, even in these quieter moments, Tywin never lost sight of his ultimate goal, preserving the Lannister legacy at all costs. His ability to compartmentalize emotions, to view people as pieces on a chessboard, was what made him such a formidable player in the Game of Thrones. Despite his strategic brilliance, Tywin's obsession with power came at a great personal cost. His inability to foster genuine connections with his children ultimately led to his undoing. Jaime's rejection of his father's expectations, Tyrion's growing resentment, and Cersei's reckless pursuit of power, all these factors contributed to Tywin's downfall. He may have been a master of the political game, but he was unable to see that the real threats to his legacy came from within his own family. Tywin's downfall serves as a powerful reminder that no amount of political maneuvering can compensate for the loss of personal relationships. In the end, Tywin was a man who valued power above all else, but he failed to recognize that true power lies not just in ruling over others, but in understanding and connecting with them. His inability to grasp this fundamental truth led to his demise, and it is perhaps the greatest tragedy of his character. Tywin's death marked a turning point in the series. With his passing, the Lannisters lost their most powerful and capable leader. Though Cersei would go on to rule in her own right, she lacked her father's strategic brilliance and discipline, leading the Lannisters into a period of decline. Tywin's absence left a power vacuum that no one in his family could truly fill, signaling the beginning of the end for House Lannister's dominance. Ultimately, Tywin Lannister was a man defined by his ambition. He was a master of political manipulation, a man who could bend kingdoms to his will with a single stroke of his quill. But in the end, his greatest strength, his ruthless pursuit of power, was also his greatest weakness. His inability to see beyond the Lannister name, to understand the needs and desires of those closest to him, ensured that his legacy would be one of both triumph and tragedy. Tywin's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. While his Machiavellian strategies brought him to the pinnacle of power, they also isolated him from the very people he sought to protect. His relationships with his children were defined by control rather than love, leading to resentment and betrayal. In the end, it was not an external enemy that brought Tywin down, but the very family he had worked so hard to preserve. As we look back on Tywin's life and legacy, we must ask ourselves, was it all worth it? Did the ends justify the means? Tywin believed they did, but his death at the hands of his own son suggests otherwise. Perhaps if Tywin had taken the time to truly understand his children, to build relationships based on trust rather than fear, he might have been able to avoid the tragic end that befell him. In the end, Tywin Lannister will be remembered as one of the most powerful and complex characters in Game of Thrones. His legacy is one of ambition, power, and control, but also of isolation, betrayal, and loss. He was a man who could command armies and bend kings to his will, but who ultimately failed to command the loyalty and love of his own family. What do you think was Tywin's biggest character flaw, and how did it contribute to his downfall? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Tywin Lannister. His story is a testament to the complexity of human ambition and the price that comes with it. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe to In Perspective for more character analyses from your favorite shows and movies. Until next time.